Hi, friends. So we are moving on to the last region of North Carolina. So last week we talked a little bit more about the mountains in North Carolina. Then over the past couple days, we've been talking about the Piedmont, which is the middle region or the middle section of our state where we live. And today we're going to start talking about the coastal plains. So the coastal plains is near the coast or it's near the beach or the ocean. Have you ever been to the beach before? What are some of the plants and the animals that you have seen at the beach? Today, we are going to talk about three plants that you can find in the coastal plains. And while I'm telling you about these plants, I want you thinking about why they grow in the coastal plains. So remember that different plants and animals grow and live in different areas because of the climate or the weather. They also grow and live in different areas because of the soil that's there. They grow and live in different areas because of the way that the land is. So, especially with these plants that grow on the coast, there are really special reasons why they survive best on the coastal plains or near the beach. So, today we're going to talk about the Venus flytrap. We're going to talk about the maritime oak tree. And we're going to talk about Spanish moss. And then tomorrow, we're going to learn about the three animals from the coastal plains, the great horned owl, which we already know a little bit about, crayfish, and wild horses. So let's get started learning about these plants. So the first plant that I have to tell you about is really, really cool. And I'm actually going to put up a video next to this one on our Google site of a Venus flytrap in action. So Venus flytraps are really popular and they grow in lots of places around the world. You can also see lots of Venus flytraps in cartoons. But really the only place in North Carolina where you can find it growing naturally or growing on its own and not having been planted somewhere is around the town of Wilmington, which is near the beach. It's about 3 hours away, and it's actually where Miss Barnhill went to college. So she went to college in Wilmington, and that's the only place in North Carolina where you can find Venus flytraps growing naturally. So Venus flytraps need sandy soil to grow. So I wonder why it survives near the beach. What kind of soil can you find near the beach? Sandy soil. Good job. So like in a marine forest. So marine means ocean. So the Venus flytrap is a carnivorous plant. So it's a plant that's a carnivore. Now, what is a carnivore? A carnivore eats animals. What animals do we know that are carnivores? Lions, lots of different animals. So this is a carnivorous plant, which means it's a plant that eats insects. So if an insect is flying by and it brushes against the bristles of the plant 2 times, you can see in the pictures at the bottom the bristles. And if it brushes against it 2 times, the trap will close really fast in less than 1 second. And the plant has to decide if it caught something that was good, like a bug that it can eat, or if it closed on maybe some trash that was floating, or if it closed on accident. So it makes that decision. So if it closed on something like a bug that the plant can eat, the plant closes completely and it traps the bug, and then it digests the bug. So it takes in the bug and it doesn't open again for 3 to 14 days. So it really depends on how big the bug is and how quickly the plant absorbs it or eats the animal. If it didn't get anything that it wanted to eat, then it opens back up in a few minutes and it waits for more prey. So a Venus flytrap is really cool because you don't hear about very many carnivorous plants or plants that can eat insects. That's pretty cool. So the next plant we're going to learn about is called a maritime oak tree. So remember that the word marine means ocean, right? So a maritime forest is a forest that's near the ocean. And so these forests are found along the beach and the coastal areas of North Carolina. And you can usually find them next to marshes or swamps or on some of the islands, like in the Outer Banks. And so if you look at the pictures, you can see that the oak trees in these pictures, that their branches go really far out from the tree. Okay, so these forests and these trees are created by salt spray. Now, let's think about near the ocean. Where could you find salt spray? Why do you think there might be salt spray near these trees? Well, think about what kind of water is in the ocean. It's salt water in the ocean. So sometimes during a storm or the wind will blow. And so the salt spray and the strong wind near the ocean, and sometimes even sand, will strike the leaves and the branches of the tree. And so these forests don't just have oak trees. They have cedar trees, holly trees, pine trees, kind of like the pine trees we were talking about yesterday, and even shrubs. And so what happens is, as the salt spray and the wind and the sand is hitting all of these things, it creates these forests where the branches and the leaves are really spread out, and they create a kind of canopy, or like a kind of cover over top of the forest, because there are so many branches spread out and so many leaves that it creates a cover on the top. So this canopy will actually protect things that are underneath the tree. So it will protect the bottom part of the tree and the ground from that wind and that salt spray. So it's almost like opening up an umbrella. And so these trees are really important because they help to keep the soil in place. So if it's really, really windy and there's lots of salt spray and lots of sand, erosion might happen. And we started talking about erosion right as we were getting out of school. But when we talk about erosion and weathering, we talk about how things are broken down and then how they're moved to other places. So if it's really windy, the soil might erode, or the soil might get picked up and move somewhere else. And so these canopies, or these forests, are really important because they help keep the soil where it is. And that soil is important for the trees and the other plants that grow, but soil is also important because animals live there. And if the soil moves too much, it can create other problems. And so these canopies also protect the wildlife, or the animals, from any hurricanes or dangerous weather that might come in from the ocean. And it protects fresh water for wildlife. So these maritime oak trees, or these maritime forests, are really important because they help to protect other parts of the land and other animals and plants from some of the things that might hurt them coming in. The last plant that we're going to talk about today is the Spanish moss. And if you've ever been to the beach, you might have seen Spanish moss on a tree. So it's actually not Spanish and it's not moss. It's actually in the pineapple family. But it doesn't really look like pineapple, and I don't think that I would like to taste it as much as pineapple. But it's actually from Mexico. And Spanish moss loves healthy trees in a tropical swampland. So why do you think Spanish moss thrives or does really well in the coastal plains? So Spanish moss actually doesn't plant roots on the tree. It just hangs on it, and it takes in all of the rain and the sunlight and any dust or anything that comes through. And so the surface, or the top of the Spanish moss plant, is covered with tiny, tiny, tiny scales that trap water when it's raining. And so they trap it and they hold on to it until the plant can absorb it. So this is a plant that needs water just like any other kind of plant. And when the Spanish moss starts to plump up after it's absorbing that water, it actually looks a different color. It looks to be more green colored. But as the water starts to dry up and it's starting to need more water, then it turns back into a gray color. So if you ever see Spanish moss and it looks green, that means it's probably rained pretty recently because there's lots of water inside the Spanish moss. If you drive by Spanish moss and you see it looks pretty gray, that means it hasn't rained in a while and it doesn't have as much water inside. And so the seeds that are on the Spanish moss are kind of like dandelions. So that means when the wind blows or when they get blown off, they can float through the air just like a dandelion until they can find a good spot to grow. Now, where do you think a Spanish moss seed would want to grow? On a tree, because that's where it lives, and on a tree. Birds can use Spanish moss to build nests. Frogs and spiders might live inside of it. There are some insects that live inside of Spanish moss. And you want to make sure that before you get too close to Spanish moss, you might want to look because there might be a snake hiding inside of it. So those are the 3 plants that we're going to talk about from the coastal plain. And the big question that I want you to answer about one of these plants is, why does this plant survive best in the coastal plains? Why does it survive best near the coast? So there are different reasons for each plant. So I want you to look back, and if you need to rewind this video to look at one of the pages, you can, but there's a reason why the Venus flytrap survives best near the coast. There's a reason why maritime oak trees are best near the coast, and there's a reason why Spanish moss grows near the coast. So I want you to tell your grown-up, or I would love for you to write about one of these plants and why it survives best at the coast. And you can take a picture of your writing and put it on Seesaw. Okay, friends, tomorrow we are going to finish up by talking about animals that live near the North Carolina coast. And then we are going to have our big assignment that goes along with all of these videos where you get to pick your favorite plant and your favorite animal to write about. Have a great day, friends. I'll see you soon.